The year was 2089 when the first alien ship appeared above Earth. It came from a place called the Velith Dominion, and it changed everything humans believed about the universe. They were not alone. The stars were full of life, full of civilizations that had been watching them for centuries. Admiral Park Ji-ho was chosen to be Earth's first voice to the galaxy. He was a tall man, with gray hair and kind eyes. He had spent his life studying war, but he hated it. When he stood before the Alien Council for the first time, he did not bring weapons. He did not bring threats. He brought gifts. "We offer you our music," he said, holding out a small device. "We offer you our stories. We offer you the best of what humanity has created." The aliens looked at each other. Some of them laughed. They had expected missiles and warships. They had expected fear and aggression. Instead, a strange species from the small blue planet offered them songs and poems. The Galactic Assembly was made of hundreds of species. Some were peaceful. Most were not. They had learned long ago that the universe was cruel. The strong survived. The weak were conquered. This was the law of existence. No one questioned it. But humans questioned everything. Over the next 30 years, Earth became known throughout the galaxy. Not for its military power. Not for its wealth. Earth became known for its kindness. Humans opened their borders to refugees from dying worlds. They shared their technology freely, asking for nothing in return. They built hospitals on planets they had never visited and cured diseases that had killed millions. Dr. Soon Minho became famous across 12 star systems. He was a quiet man who rarely smiled, but his hands had saved more lives than any weapon had ever taken. He spent 15 years traveling from planet to planet, healing species that were not his own. When asked why he did it, he simply said, "Because they needed help." The aliens did not understand this. In their experience, no one helped without expecting something back. There had to be a trick. There had to be a hidden purpose. But years passed, and humans kept giving. They kept helping. They kept being kind. And so the galaxy decided that humans were fools. Commander Kong Somi heard the whispers. She was the head of Earth's defense forces, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She had trained soldiers her entire life, and she knew what humans were capable of when pushed. She tried to warn the assembly. "Do not mistake our kindness for weakness," she said during one council meeting. Her voice was calm, but cold, like ice hiding deep water. "We choose peace. But do not think we are unable to choose war." The alien delegates smiled politely. Some of them did not bother hiding their amusement. What could a species that cried during fictional stories do? What threat could a civilization that kept small animals as family members possibly pose? Humans were soft. Humans were emotional. Humans were no danger to anyone. They called Earth the Garden of Fools. Back on Earth, life continued. Children went to schools where they learned about alien cultures. Scientists worked alongside beings from distant stars. Artists created works that blended human creativity with alien techniques. It was a golden age of cooperation and hope. Admiral Park Ji-ho, now old and tired, gave his final speech before retiring. He stood before the United Nations and looked out at the faces of humanity. "We have achieved something remarkable," he said. "We have proven that a civilization can rise without stepping on others. We have shown that strength does not require cruelty. Some say we are fools for believing in kindness. Perhaps we are, but I would rather be a fool who tried to make the universe better than a wise man who accepted its darkness." The crowd applauded. Around the world, people watched and felt pride in what humanity had become. But not everyone was celebrating. In a secure facility deep beneath the mountains, Commander Kong Somi stood before a massive screen. On it were blueprints for warships. Not exploration vessels. Not transport ships. Warships designed for one purpose only: destruction. How many? Asked General Ru Heijan, a man built like a mountain with a face that rarely showed emotion. 2,000, Somi replied. Hidden in facilities across the solar system. Fully armed, fully staffed. Ready to deploy within 72 hours. The general nodded slowly. And the assembly knows nothing? Nothing. They think we disbanded our military decades ago. They think we turned our weapons into farming equipment. A small, cold smile crossed her face. Let them think that. This was humanity's secret. For all their kindness, for all their talk of peace and culture, they had never truly disarmed. They had simply hidden their strength. They had built weapons in the shadows while offering flowers in the light. It was not deception. It was caution. History had taught humans a painful lesson. Those who cannot defend themselves will eventually need defending. And there might not be anyone willing to help, so they prepared. They trained. They waited. And they hoped they would never have to use what they had built. Years passed. Humanity continued its peaceful existence. They welcomed more refugees. They healed more sick. They shared more art. The galaxy continued to laugh at them. And humans continued to smile back. Commander Kongsomi grew older, but never softer. Every night, she checked the status of the hidden fleet. Every morning, she read reports from across the galaxy. She was watching, waiting. They will test us eventually, she told her officers. Someone will decide that the Garden of Fools has something they want, and they will come to take it. Her officers listened in silence. When that day comes, she continued, we will show them what grows in this garden. We will show them what lies beneath the flowers. She turned to face the window. Looking up at the stars, they will wish they had never planted that seed. The galaxy was not ready for what humanity could become, but someday soon, they would learn, and the lesson would be written in fire. HFY 7 was beautiful. It was a planet of green valleys and blue oceans located at the edge of explored space. 4 million humans called it home. They had built cities there, planted gardens, raised families. Children who had never seen Earth grew up hearing stories about it from their grandparents. The colony was named after the Korean word for grace, and it lived up to its name. Governor Bikana loved her planet. She was a small woman with a warm smile and a voice that could calm any argument. She had spent 20 years turning Hwan into a paradise. There were schools where children learned both human and alien languages. There were parks where families gathered to watch the twin suns set. There were hospitals that treated anyone who needed help, regardless of where they came from. Hannah believed in diplomacy. She believed that every problem could be solved with words. She had never met a conflict she could not end with patience and understanding. The Kreth. The Gemini tested that belief. The Kreth were a warrior species. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved millions of beings. Their empire was built on fear and violence. They respected nothing but strength, and they saw kindness as an invitation to attack. When their ships first appeared in HFY's system, Governor Hannah was not afraid. She had dealt with difficult species before. She opened communication channels and invited their leader to talk. We have no quarrel with you, she said, her voice steady. Whatever you need, we can discuss. There is no need for conflict. The Kreth commander was a massive creature covered in dark scales. His eyes were yellow and cold. He looked at this small human woman and felt nothing but contempt. We want your planet, he said. Your resources. Your technology. Surrender everything, and we might let some of you live. Hannah took a breath. We can share our resources. We can share our knowledge. There is enough for everyone. Please, let us find a peaceful solution. The commander laughed. It was an ugly sound. You humans are exactly what they say. Soft, weak. You think kindness will save you? He leaned forward. Nothing will save you. Communication ended. Hannah immediately contacted Earth. She sent reports to the Galactic Assembly. She begged for help, for intervention, for anything. The Assembly promised to investigate the situation. Earth promised to send diplomats. Neither arrived in time. On the morning of June 14, 2119, 7 Kreth warships descended on HFY 7. They did not announce their attack. They did not demand surrender. They simply began firing. The first bombs fell on the capital city. Buildings that had taken decades to construct vanished in seconds. Thousands died before they even understood what was happening. The sky turned red with fire. Nari was a teacher. She was 28 years old with long black hair and a gentle voice. That morning, she had been preparing lessons for her students. When the explosions started, she gathered the children and led them to the emergency shelter beneath the school. 20-3 children, ages 6 to 12. They looked at her with terrified eyes, and she forced herself to smile. "It will be okay," she said. "Help is coming. We just have to wait." But help was not coming. The Kreth ships moved systematically across the planet. They destroyed every city, every town, every settlement. They did not take prisoners. They did not show mercy. They glassed the surface, turning everything to ash and dust. Governor Hannah died in her office, still trying to negotiate. Her last words were a plea for her people. The Kreth commander did not even bother to respond. In the shelter, Nari held the children close. The walls shook with each explosion. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered and died. She found a communication device and sent one final message to Earth. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "They are killing everyone," she said. "There is no warning. There is no mercy. Please, remember us? Remember Hawan? Remember what they did?" Signal cut off. Moments later, the shelter collapsed. 4 million humans died that day. Men, women, children. Entire families erased in 18 minutes. The planet that had been named for grace became a tomb. News reached Earth within hours. At first, people did not believe it. There had to be a mistake. The Kreth would not dare. The assembly would have stopped them. Someone would have helped. But the images were undeniable. Satellite footage showed the destruction in horrible detail. Where there had been cities, there was only glass and ash. Where there had been life, there was only silence. Commander Kong Somi watched the footage in her command center. Her face showed nothing. But her hands were clenched so tight that her nails drew blood. Admiral Park Ji-ho, retired and living quietly on Earth, saw the news on his screen. He closed his eyes and wept. Everything he had worked for, everything he had believed in, gone, burned, murdered. The Galactic Assembly released a statement expressing concern over the incident. They promised to review the Kreth's actions. They suggested that perhaps Hwan had provoked the attack somehow. Earth said nothing. For 6 months, there was silence. No diplomatic protests. No angry speeches. No demands for justice. Humans recalled their ambassadors. They brought their people home. They closed their borders. The galaxy watched and waited. Some species felt guilt. Most felt relief. The fools had finally learned their place. The garden had been burned. Now the gardeners would accept reality. They were wrong. In the darkness of space, hidden from all sensors, 2,000 warships began to move. Crews who had trained for decades finally received their orders. Weapons that had never been fired were loaded and armed. Humanity had spent 30 years showing the galaxy its best face. Now they would show something else. Something ancient. Something terrible. The monster behind the music was waking up. And it was hungry for justice. The silence was terrifying. For 6 months after the massacre, Earth said nothing. No angry transmissions. No diplomatic protests. No demands for revenge. The humans simply disappeared. They closed their borders. They recalled every ambassador, every scientist, every aid worker from alien space. Ships that had once traveled freely between stars returned home and did not leave again. The Galactic Assembly grew nervous. This was not how species behaved after tragedy. They were supposed to rage. They were supposed to threaten. They were supposed to beg the Assembly for help or justice. Silence was unnatural. Silence was frightening. Ambassador Choi Tai-wan was the last human in alien space. He had served Earth for 40 years, always believing that words could build bridges between worlds. Now he stood before the Assembly one final time, and his face was made of stone. The chamber was full. Every species had sent representatives. They wanted to hear what humanity would say. They wanted to understand what was happening behind Earth's closed borders. Taiwan looked at them. These beings who had laughed at human kindness. These civilizations who had watched 4 million people die and called it concerning. His heart was empty of everything except cold, patient anger. For 30 years, he began. His voice flat and quiet. We offered you our friendship. We gave you our music. You called it noise? We gave you our art. You called it foolishness. We shared our medicine, our technology, our homes. We welcomed your refugees when no one else would take them. He paused. The chamber was completely silent. We did this because we believed in something. We believed that kindness could change the universe. We believed that if we showed you our best, you might show us yours. His voice grew colder. We were naive. He took a step forward. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. We watched for 1 million of our people die. Children, families, innocents, who had never harmed anyone. And what did you do? You expressed concern. You promised to investigate. You suggested that perhaps we had provoked our own murder. His eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of every species that looked away in shame. We showed you our culture because we hoped you would never have to see what lies beneath it. We showed you our kindness because we hoped you would never have to face our anger. He straightened his back. You have made your choice. Now we will make ours. Ambassador Choi Taiwan turned and walked out of the chamber. He did not look back. In orbit around Earth, Fleet Admiral Han Siwoo watched the broadcast on his command screen. He was a young man for his position, only 42, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it had come. Behind him, through the massive windows of his flagship, 2,000 warships waited in perfect formation. They were painted black, invisible against the void of space. Each one carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Each one was crewed by soldiers who had trained since childhood for this moment. Admiral, his communications officer said, Ambassador Choi has left the assembly. His ship is returning to Earth space. Han Siwoo nodded. Good. Begin final preparations. We move in 72 hours. For 30 years, humanity had hidden its true strength. They had built weapons in secret facilities across the solar system. They had developed technologies that made alien warships look like toys. They had trained soldiers with methods that no other species could match. The galaxy thought humans were soft because they cried. They did not understand that humans cried because they felt deeply, and that same depth of feeling could become rage. The galaxy thought humans were weak because they kept pets. They did not understand that the bond between a human and their companion was the same bond that made humans willing to die. For each other, every trait that aliens mocked was, in truth, a weapon, in a secure room deep within the flagship. Intelligence Officer Jung Yunbi reviewed data on the Kreth hegemony. She was a small woman with glasses and a mind like a computer. She had spent 6 months studying the enemy, learning their weaknesses, planning their destruction. Their fleet is large but poorly organized. She reported to Admiral Han Siwoo. Their commanders are arrogant. They do not expect resistance from anyone, certainly not from us. Good, the Admiral replied. Arrogance creates blind spots. Sir Yunbi hesitated. May I ask a question? Go ahead. The Kreth have millions of civilians. People who had nothing to do with the massacre? What are our rules of engagement? Admiral Han Siwoo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. We are not the Kreth. We will not become them. Military targets only. Evacuate civilians when possible. Offer medical aid to wounded enemies. He looked out at the stars. We are going to war because they murdered our innocent. We will not murder theirs in return. Yunbi nodded. Understood, sir. 3 days later, a single transmission was sent to the Kreth Hegemony High Command. It contained one word. Run. The Kreth commander who received it laughed. He showed it to his officers and they laughed too. The soft humans thought they could threaten the mightiest empire in the sector. This was a joke. This was nothing. They stopped laughing when the first attack came. Captain Shindo Yoon led the assault. She was 31 years old with short hair and a reputation for impossible flying. Her squadron dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the Kreth's primary defense station. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the station was dust, and not a single human ship had been lost. News spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The Garden of Fools had grown thorns. The gentle giant had awakened, and it was coming for blood. The war for HFY had begun. The Kreth expected a fight. What they got was annihilation. Captain Shin De-yoon became a legend in the first week of the war. Her squadron moved like ghosts through enemy space, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before the Kreth could respond. She had been trained since she was 18 years old. Every lesson had prepared her for this moment. Her pilots flew with a precision that terrified enemy commanders. There was no fear in their movements. There was no hesitation. They struck targets with surgical accuracy, destroying military installations while leaving civilian areas untouched. The Kreth had never fought an enemy like this. Their previous conquests had been easy. Other species surrendered quickly or fought with disorganized panic. Humans did neither. They fought with cold, calculated fury. How are they doing this? The Kreth High Commander demanded after losing his third defensive line in 2 days. They are supposed to be weak. His officers had no answer. On the ground, General Ru Hajan led the infantry assault. He was a massive man who rarely spoke, but when he gave orders, his soldiers obeyed instantly. They trusted him completely, because he had never asked them to do anything. He would not do himself. The first planet they liberated was a Kreth slave world called Nexer 4. Millions of beings from conquered species lived there in chains, forced to mine resources for the hegemony. When human ships appeared in orbit, the slaves did not know what to expect. General Hajan addressed them through broadcast. "We are not here to conquer. We are not here to enslave. We are here to free you." The slaves did not believe it at first. No one freed slaves. That was not how the galaxy worked. Then the human soldiers arrived. They broke the chains. They distributed food and medicine. They treated wounded aliens with the same care they would give their own people. Doctors from Earth set up field hospitals and worked through the night. Word spread to other slave worlds. Humans were coming. Humans were liberating. Humans were not what the galaxy had believed, but humanity showed no mercy to the enemy military fleet. Admiral Han Siwoo commanded the campaign from his flagship. Every battle was planned with careful precision. He studied the Kreth commanders, learned their patterns, exploited their weaknesses. He was not driven by rage. He was driven by cold determination. "We do not fight for revenge," he told his officers. "We fight so that no one will ever do to another species what the Kreth did to HFY." The Kreth tried to negotiate after the third week. Their high commander sent a message offering to surrender, swan space, and pay reparations. Admiral Han Siwoo's response was broadcast on every channel. HFY surrendered too. You killed them anyway. Governor Buchanan asked for peace. You gave her death. 4 million people begged for mercy. You gave them fire. His voice was ice. There will be no negotiation. There will be no terms. There will only be justice. Intelligence Officer Jang Yoonbi had a special mission. She was tasked with finding the 7 captains who had led the assault on HFY. These were the beings who had given the orders. These were the ones who had fired the weapons that murdered millions. She found them one by one. The first was hiding on a remote moon, surrounded by guards. Human special forces breached his compound in under 10 minutes. He was captured alive and taken to Earth for trial. The second tried to flee to uncharted space. A human tracking ship followed him for 3 weeks before finally cornering him in an asteroid field. He too was taken alive. By the end of the second month, all 7 captains were in custody. They had expected execution. They had expected torture. What they received was worse. Each captain was convicted in a public trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings showed them laughing as they destroyed HFY. Communications revealed their contempt for human life. Their sentence was not death. It was eternity. They were confined to cells where they were forced to watch recordings of HFY's final moments. They were required to learn the name and face of every person they had killed. 4 million names. 4 million faces. They would spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what they had done.
Right.
Death is too easy, Commander Kong, Somi said when asked about the sentence. They need to understand. They need to remember. They need to feel the weight of every life they ended. The war continued for 8 months. The Kreth hegemony, once the most feared empire in the sector, collapsed from within. Their allies abandoned them. Their conquered worlds rose in rebellion. Species that had been enslaved for generations saw their chance and took it. Human soldiers fought on every front. They were outnumbered on every battlefield. They won anyway. The galaxy watched in shock. These were the same beings who had offered poetry and music. These were the same creatures who had built hospitals and welcomed refugees. How could they also be this terrifying war machine? The answer was simple. Humans were not monsters pretending to be kind. They were kind beings who could become monsters when kindness failed. General Rue. Hajan captured the Kreth homeworld on the 204th day of the war. His soldiers moved through the streets, but they did not loot. They did not kill civilians. They established order and began providing aid to those who needed it. The Kreth High Commander was captured trying to escape on a private shuttle. He was brought before General Hajan in chains. Why? The commander asked. Why did you not simply destroy us? You had the power. General Hajan looked at him for a long moment. Because we are not you, he said finally. We never wanted to be. The war was over, but humanity's message to the galaxy was just beginning. The Galactic Assembly gathered in emergency session. Every species sent their highest representatives. The chamber was full, but silence hung heavy in the air. They were waiting for humanity to speak, and for the first time in history. They were afraid of what they might hear. Outside the station, through the massive viewing windows, 1,000 human warships floated in perfect formation. They had not come to attack. They had come to deliver a message. President Moon Ji-woo appeared on the central platform via hologram. She was 53 years old, the daughter of refugees who had fled a dying world and found safety on Earth. She had grown up hearing stories of human kindness. She had also grown up hearing stories of human strength. Behind her stood the survivors. Families of Hawan who had lost everything. Parents who had lost children. Children who had lost parents. They held photographs of the dead. 4 million faces looking out at the galaxy that had abandoned them. President Moon began to speak. Her voice was calm but carried across the entire chamber. 8 months ago, you sat in this very room and called the murder of 4 million of our people concerning. You suggested we had provoked our own massacre. You offered words when we needed action. You offered nothing when we needed everything. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We did not want this war. We spent 30 years proving that we were not a threat. We opened our homes to your refugees. We healed your sick. We taught your children. We shared every gift we had because we believed that kindness could build a better universe. Her eyes moved across the assembled delegates. Some looked down in shame. Others met her gaze with fear. You taught us otherwise. You taught us that the galaxy respects only power. You taught us that mercy is seen as permission to attack. You taught us that our culture, our art, our love meant nothing to you. Fleet Admiral Han Suwu stepped forward to stand beside her. His uniform was simple, without decoration or medals. His face showed nothing but quiet determination. 30 years ago, he said, my predecessor, Admiral Park Ji-ho, offered you music. Today, I offer you something different. A warning. He raised his hand, and the lights in the chamber dimmed. The viewing windows magnified the fleet outside. Ship after ship, stretching into the distance, each one armed with weapons that could shatter worlds. This is 1/3 of our fleet, Admiral Han Siwu said. The rest remain in Earth space, protecting our home. We built these ships in secret because we hoped we would never need them. We trained crews for decades because we feared this day would come. He lowered his hand. The lights returned to normal, the Kreth hegemony no longer exists. Their empire has fallen. Their military has been destroyed. But we did not take their territory. We did not enslave their people. We freed those they had conquered and left them to rebuild. President Moon stepped forward again. We are not here to demand tribute. We are not here to establish dominion over your worlds. That is not who we are. But hear this clearly. Her voice hardened. Earth will no longer beg for a seat at your table. We will not apologize for being kind. We will not explain ourselves to those who mocked us. The next species that mistakes our compassion for weakness, the next empire that touches our people. She paused. There will be no warning. There will be no declaration. There will be no mercy. The chamber was absolutely silent. You wanted to see the monster behind the music, President Moon said. Now you have seen it. Remember this moment. Remember what kindness looks like when it has been pushed too far. Behind her, the survivors of Hawan raised their photographs. 4 million faces. 4 million lives. For a million reasons why Earth would never again trust the galaxy to protect its children. Ambassador Choi Taiwan, standing at the edge of the platform, spoke the final words. We came to the stars, hoping to find friends. We found only those who saw our kindness as weakness. Very well. We have learned our lesson. He looked directly at the delegates. Have you learned yours? Earth withdrew from the Galactic Assembly that day. They did not slam doors or make threats. They simply left, taking their ships and their people with them. But they did not abandon their principles entirely in the months that followed. Earth established its own sphere of influence. The species that had been kind to humanity during the dark years were welcomed. The refugees who had been abandoned by everyone else found homes on human worlds. The slaves freed from the Kreth were offered new lives. Commander Kong Somi, now old but still sharp, oversaw the new defense network. She had spent her entire life preparing for war. Now she prepared for peace. A peace protected by strength that no one would dare challenge. Dr. Yoon Minho returned to his work, healing those who needed help. But now his patients included veterans of the war. Soldiers who had seen terrible things and needed to find their way back to themselves. Captain Shin Do-yoon became a teacher at the military academy, training the next generation of pilots. She taught them to be lethal. She also taught them to be merciful. The two were not opposites. General Ru Haejeon retired to a quiet farm on Earth. He grew vegetables and raised animals and tried to forget the things he had done in the name of justice and across the galaxy. A new saying spread among spacefaring civilizations. Parents whispered it to children. Commanders reminded their soldiers. Diplomats repeated it before every negotiation with humans. Never mistake a human smile for submission. Beneath every garden, there are graves. And beneath every poem, there is a warrior who chose not to fight. The saying always ended the same way, till you gave them no choice. Earth had shown the universe its kindness. Then it had shown the universe its wrath. Now it waited to see which lesson the galaxy would remember. In a small park on Earth, a young girl played among flowers. She had never known Hawan. She had never known war. She only knew that her planet was safe, that her people were strong, and that somewhere among the stars, others were learning what humans had always known. True strength is not the absence of gentleness. True strength is the choice to be gentle when you have the power to be cruel. Humanity had made that choice for 30 years. They would make it again. But now the galaxy knew what would happen if they were ever forced to choose differently. The garden of fools had grown thorns. And heaven help anyone foolish enough to test them again?